The school building looked old and tired, like it had seen too many problems and never learned how to fix them. The paint on the walls was peeling, the floors were scratched, and the lockers were covered with rude words written in marker. Many students walked through the halls with their heads down, already tired even though the day had just started. This was not a place where kindness came easy. On that same morning, a black girl walked through the front doors for the first time. Her backpack was simple, her clothes were clean but plain, and her face showed calm instead of fear. Inside, her heart was beating fast, but she didn't let it show. She had been to new schools before. She knew how fast people judged, and she knew that the first day could decide everything. She stood in the office for a moment, holding her schedule, listening to the noise from the hallway. Laughter, shouting, lockers slamming. Some of it sounded happy, but most of it sounded rough. A woman behind the desk barely looked up as she pointed her toward the hallway. No welcome, no smile. Just another new student dropped into the chaos. As soon as she stepped into the hall, eyes turned toward her. Some curious, some rude, some already deciding where she fit. A few students whispered, others stared openly. She walked steady, reading the room without saying a word. She could feel it, the way this place worked. Power mattered here. Weakness was hunted. By the time she reached her first class, someone bumped into her shoulder on purpose. Her books slipped from her hands and hit the floor. Laughter followed. A group of students stood nearby, smiling like they had just watched a show. She looked down at her books, then up at them. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She bent down slowly and picked everything up. When she stood again, she met their eyes. Her face stayed calm, but her look was firm. Not angry, not scared, just clear. One of them smirked and said something under his breath, something meant to make the others laugh. It worked, but she didn't reply. She turned and walked into class like nothing had happened. That small moment told them something important. She wasn't easy. In class, she sat near the back and listened. She answered questions when called on, clear and confident. She didn't try to impress anyone, but she didn't hide either. Some students noticed. Others didn't care yet. The ones who did care were the ones who liked control. Between classes, the pressure grew. Someone blocked her path at the lockers. Someone else laughed too loudly behind her. A rude comment followed her down the hall. Each time she stayed quiet. Each time she stood tall. Inside, she reminded herself of the lessons she'd learned at home. Stay calm, read the situation, never act out of fear. By lunchtime, the attention became open. The same group from earlier sat at a table near the center of the cafeteria. They were loud, confident, and clearly used to being watched. As she walked past with her tray, one of them stuck out a foot. She didn't fall, but the message was clear. She stopped. The cafeteria went quiet in that strange way, like people felt something coming but didn't know what. She turned slowly and looked at them, still calm, still controlled. "I'm just trying to eat," she said, her voice steady and not loud. "You don't need to do this." That surprised them more than anger would have. For a second, no one spoke. Then someone laughed, trying to break the tension. A comment followed, sharp and meant to hurt. People nearby waited for her reaction. She set her tray down. What happened next wasn't wild or cruel. There was no shouting, no chaos. When one of them stepped too close, she reacted with speed and confidence, pushing him away and keeping her balance. When another tried to grab her bag, she twisted free and stood her ground. It was quick, controlled, enough to show she wasn't helpless. Teachers rushed in before it could go any further. Voices rose, fingers pointed. The bullies tried to talk their way out like they always did, but there were too many witnesses this time. She stood there, breathing steady, eyes clear. She told exactly what happened. No extra words, no drama, just truth. By the end of lunch, the story had already spread. The new girl didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't run. She faced them and won their respect even if they wouldn't admit it. The rest of the day felt different. People looked at her differently. Some with curiosity, some with quiet admiration. The bullies stayed back, watching instead of acting. They hadn't lost power before, and they didn't know what to do with someone who refused to play the role they expected. As the final bell rang, she walked out of the building into the afternoon light. Her body was tired, but her mind was clear. She knew this was only the beginning. She had made a statement without trying to be a hero. She didn't know yet that her real test wouldn't be standing up to bullies. It would be choosing kindness in a place that didn't believe in it. And somewhere in that same school, unnoticed by most, a quiet boy had watched everything from a distance, wondering for the first time if maybe things could change. The next morning felt heavier than the first. The girl noticed it the moment she stepped through the school doors. People were watching her more closely now. Some looked away when she met their eyes. Others whispered without hiding it. A few nodded at her, quick and quiet, like they wanted to show respect but were afraid to be seen doing it. She walked the halls with the same calm steps as before. Inside, she was alert. She knew this kind of attention could turn in any direction. Sometimes people admired strength. Other times, they waited for a chance to challenge it. In her first class, she felt it again, that silence when she entered. Chairs stopped moving. Talking dropped low. She took her seat and opened her notebook. She focused on the board, refusing to let the room decide her mood. She reminded herself why she was there. To learn, to move forward, to build a future bigger than this building. During group work, no one chose her at first. Students glanced at her, then back at their friends. Finally, a teacher assigned her to a table near the window. The students there were quiet and stiff, unsure how to act around her. She didn't force conversation. She simply did the work, spoke when needed, and listened when others talked. Slowly, the tension eased. Between classes, the bullies watched from a distance. They didn't approach her like before. Instead, they laughed loudly among themselves, throwing comments into the air that might have been about her or might not. She didn't react. She knew reacting was what they wanted. It was during the third class of the day that she noticed him. He sat near the front, shoulders curved inward, eyes fixed on his desk. His clothes were worn, his shoes old, and his backpack looked like it had been repaired more than once. When the teacher asked a question, he raised his hand slowly, like he wasn't sure he should. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. The answer was right. A few students snickered anyway. The girl noticed the way his face tightened, just for a second, before he went still again. She noticed because she knew that feeling. The feeling of being seen only as something easy to hurt. At lunch, she saw him sitting alone at the edge of the cafeteria, eating quickly like he wanted to disappear. A group of boys walked past his table and knocked his drink over. It spilled across the floor. They laughed and kept walking. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the mess. Something tightened in her chest. She paused, holding her tray, feeling eyes on her again. She knew what people expected. They expected her to sit somewhere visible, somewhere strong, somewhere safe. Instead, she walked toward the corner. She sat down across from him and placed her tray on the table. The sound made him flinch. He looked up, surprised, clearly not used to company. "You can use my napkins," she said gently, sliding them toward him. He hesitated, then nodded. "Thanks." They ate in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Around them, whispers started. People noticed. The bullies noticed too. "You don't have to sit here," he said after a while, not looking at her. "They'll mess with you more if you do." She shrugged lightly. "They already tried." He glanced at her, eyes wide for a second. You're the new girl." She smiled, small and honest. "I guess so." From that day on, they started sitting together. Not because they planned it, but because it felt natural. They talked about classes, homework, and small things at first. She learned that he loved reading and drawing, that he helped his younger siblings every day after school, and that he never talked about his parents unless someone asked. What she didn't learn right away was why everyone treated him like he didn't matter. That answer came soon. One afternoon, as they walked down the hall together, someone shoved him into a locker. His books fell. Laughter followed. The same laughter she had heard on her first day. She stopped. "So this is how it works," she said calmly, looking at the group. You only feel strong when someone won't fight back. One of them sneered. Mind your business. He is my business, she replied. The hallway grew quiet again. Teachers were nearby. Eyes were everywhere. The bullies backed off, throwing insults as they walked away. He stood frozen for a moment. You shouldn't have done that, he whispered. Now they'll really hate me. She knelt to help him gather his books. They already did, she said softly. That's not your fault. From that day forward, the bullying around him changed. It didn't stop, but it became careful, quiet, hidden. The bullies didn't want trouble with her again. Others noticed too. Some students started greeting him. Some stopped laughing when he spoke. Small changes, but real ones. As for her, people were confused. They expected her to chase popularity now that she had power. Instead, she chose the person no one wanted to sit beside. By the end of the week, rumors spread. Some said she felt sorry for him. Others said she was pretending. A few said she was wasting her strength. She ignored it all. She saw something others didn't. She saw courage in quiet places. She saw kindness where no one was looking. And without realizing it, she had started something bigger than herself. She had challenged the rules of the school, not by force but by choice. And that made people more uncomfortable than any fight ever could. By the start of the next week, the school felt different, even though nothing on the outside had changed. The same cracked floors, the same loud bells, the same crowded halls. But the way people moved had shifted. Conversations stopped when the girl and the boy walked past together. Some students watched with curiosity, others with judgment, a few with quiet respect. The girl noticed it, but she didn't let it guide her steps. She focused on getting through the day, on classes, on homework, on helping the boy feel less invisible. He still walked with his shoulders slightly bent, like he was used to protecting himself. But now there was something new in his eyes. A small spark. Not confidence yet, but hope. During class, she encouraged him to speak up when he knew the answer. She didn't push him in front of others. She simply whispered, "You know this?" and smiled. When he raised his hand and answered correctly, she nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. Others noticed. A few students started asking him questions about homework. Some only did it because she was nearby, but others stayed even when she walked away. He answered politely every time. He never bragged, never acted proud. That made the bullies angry. They didn't like that their old target was changing. They didn't like that the girl wasn't impressed by them. So they tried a different way. Not loud, not obvious. They spread stories. They said the girl was pretending to be kind to look good. They said she was using the boy to make herself seem special. They laughed behind their hands and rolled their eyes whenever the two passed by. The boy heard the whispers. One afternoon, he stopped walking beside her and slowed his steps. "Maybe we shouldn't be seen together so much," he said quietly. "They're saying things again." She stopped and turned to face him. "Are you ashamed of me?" she asked, not angry, just honest. His face flushed. "No, I'm ashamed of myself." That hurt her more than insults ever could. She took a breath and spoke gently. "You don't owe anyone distance, and you don't owe anyone silence." He nodded, but she could see the fear hadn't left him. That fear followed them into the next days. He spoke less. He laughed less. He kept his head down again, like he was trying to disappear. She realized then that standing beside someone wasn't always enough. Sometimes people needed time to believe they deserved support. The real test came during a group presentation. The teacher paired students randomly. The girl and the boy ended up together, along with two others who clearly didn't want to work with him. They avoided eye contact and whispered to each other. When it came time to divide the work, no one gave him a task. She noticed. "What about him?" she asked. "He should present this part." One of the others laughed nervously. "He's not good at talking." "He answered half the questions in class yesterday," she replied calmly. "He'll do fine." The boy froze. I can help with notes," he said quickly. She shook her head. "You can do more than that." Practice day came. His hands shook as he held the paper. His voice cracked at first. A few students laughed. She didn't step in front of him. She didn't speak for him. She just stood there, steady, meeting his eyes and nodding. He took a breath. And then he spoke again. This time his voice was clearer. Still soft, but steady. He explained the topic simply, correctly. The room went quiet. When he finished, even the ones who doubted him had nothing to say. That moment stayed with him. On presentation day, he spoke without shaking. He didn't rush. He didn't hide. The teacher smiled. After class, someone clapped once. Then another. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real. The bullies watched from the back, faces tight. They didn't act right away. They waited. Later that week, during after-school hours, they cornered him near the bike rack. No crowd, no teachers nearby, just enough distance to feel safe. The girl wasn't there. At least they thought she wasn't. She saw it from across the yard and walked over calmly. Not running, not shouting. "What's going on?" she asked. They stepped back slightly. They remembered lunch. They remembered the hallway. "Nothing," one of them muttered. She looked at the boy. His hands were tight at his sides, but he was standing straight. "Go ahead," she said softly to him. "Tell them." He swallowed. "I'm tired of this," he said. His voice was quiet, but it didn't break. "You don't get to decide who I am." For a moment no one moved. Then the bullies laughed, but it sounded forced. "Whatever," one said, and they walked away. It wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was a step. That evening, as the sun dropped low and students headed home, the boy looked at her and said, "You make me feel like I'm not broken." She smiled. "You were never broken." He didn't fully believe it yet, but he wanted to, and in that wanting, something inside him began to change. The school still wasn't kind. The whispers hadn't stopped. The bullies hadn't given up. But the girl knew now that this wasn't just about standing strong. It was about helping someone learn how to stand on their own. The weeks passed, and the school moved toward winter. The days grew shorter, and the halls felt colder, even with the heaters working. Tests, assignments, and stress filled the air. For many students, it was just another tiring season. But for the girl and the boy, things were slowly reaching a turning point. The boy was changing. Not in a loud way, not overnight, but in small moments that mattered. He walked with his head a little higher. He spoke when spoken to. He no longer rushed to hide when laughter echoed behind him. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled every step he took. The girl noticed these changes and felt proud, though she never said it out loud. She didn't want him to feel like he was improving because of her. She wanted him to know the strength came from himself. Still, not everyone liked what they saw. The bullies felt their power slipping. Teachers were watching more closely. Students were less willing to laugh along. And worst of all, the boy they once pushed around now looked them in the eyes. So they decided to strike one last time. It happened on a Friday afternoon, after most clubs had ended. The halls were quieter than usual. Lockers echoed when they closed. The girl was staying late to help a teacher organize papers. She told the boy to go home and not wait for her. He almost listened, but something told him not to leave right away. As he stepped outside, he heard voices near the back of the school. Laughter, sharp and familiar. His chest tightened. He slowed his steps. They stood near the storage area, blocking the narrow path. Their smiles weren't playful. They were tense. "So now you think you're better than us?" one of them said. He swallowed. His heart raced, but he didn't step back. "No," he said. "I just think I deserve peace." They laughed, but it didn't sound confident. One of them stepped forward. "You think she'll save you again?" He shook his head. "I'm not asking her to." That answer confused them. Inside the building, the girl felt uneasy. She stacked papers faster than needed, her thoughts drifting. She checked the clock and decided to leave early. When she stepped outside and saw the group near the back, her stomach dropped. She didn't run. She walked. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. They turned, surprised. "She's always showing up," one of them muttered. She looked at the boy. He was pale but standing tall. "Go wait by the gate," she said quietly. He hesitated. "I'll be right there," she added. He nodded and stepped away, even though every part of him wanted to stay. The bullies scoffed. "Always protecting him," one said. "What do you even see in him?" She didn't raise her voice. "Someone who doesn't need to hurt others to feel strong." That made them angry. Words flew. Accusations. Insults meant to cut deep. She didn't return them. She simply stood there, steady, letting teachers and cameras nearby do their work. When a staff member appeared at the end of the walkway, the bullies scattered like they always did. Later, near the gate, the boy waited with shaking hands. "You shouldn't have come," he said when he saw her. "They could've." She stopped him. "You faced them first. That matters." He looked down. "I was scared." "So was I," she said honestly. Bravery doesn't mean fear disappears. It means you don't let it decide for you. That night, he went home and thought about her words. The next week brought something unexpected. A school assembly. Students gathered in the gym. Teachers talked about respect, safety, and standing up for one another. Felt routine at first. But then the principal asked if anyone wanted to share something. The room stayed quiet. Then slowly the boy stood up. The girl felt her breath catch. Hands shaking, voice unsteady, he spoke about being pushed, laughed at, and ignored. He spoke about silence hurting as much as words. He spoke about someone choosing to sit beside him when no one else would. He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. The room was silent. When he finished, no one laughed. Some students looked away, ashamed. Others clapped. The bullies sat still, eyes low. After the assembly, the halls buzzed with quiet conversations. Things were changing again. Later that day, as they walked together, the boy looked at her and said, "I think I understand now." "Understand what?" she asked. "Why you don't walk away." She smiled. "And why don't I?" "Because everyone deserves to be seen," he said. She nodded. Something deeper passed between them then. Not loud, not rushed, just real. The school hadn't become perfect. There were still whispers, still stares, but something had shifted. The bullies were no longer the loudest voices, and the quietest student had finally been heard. By the time spring arrived, the school no longer felt like the same place it had been months earlier. The walls were still old, the lockers still dented, and the rules still imperfect. But the air felt lighter. People spoke a little softer. Laughter didn't always mean cruelty anymore. The girl noticed the change most during the small moments. Students who once looked away now smiled when they passed her. A few even thanked her, quietly, for standing up when no one else did. She accepted their words with calm grace, never acting proud. She didn't believe she was special. She believed she had simply chosen not to look away. The boy had changed too. He no longer waited for permission to exist. He walked into class without shrinking. He raised his hand when he knew the answer and accepted mistakes without panic. Some days were still hard, but they no longer broke him. One afternoon, they sat together on the steps outside the building, watching other students leave. The sun was warm, and the sky was clear. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Do you ever wish you stayed quiet?" he asked softly. She thought about it. About the first day. About the stairs. About the risks. "No," she said. "I wish people had been kinder sooner. But I don't regret choosing you." He looked at her, surprised by her honesty. "Why me?" She smiled gently. "Because you never stopped being kind, even when the world wasn't." That answer stayed with him. Rumors spread as they always do. Some students said she liked him. Others laughed at the idea. They expected her to choose someone louder, stronger, more popular. She didn't explain herself. When she walked beside him, when she waited for him after class, when she laughed at his quiet jokes, she did it openly. Not to prove a point, just because it felt right. The bullies noticed, of course, but they no longer ruled the halls. Consequences had caught up to them. Teachers paid attention now. Students spoke up more. Silence was no longer guaranteed. One day, near the end of the school year, something unexpected happened. A classmate slipped in the hallway and dropped their books. Before anyone laughed, the boy knelt down to help. Then another student joined. Then another. The girl watched from a distance, her chest tight with emotion. Change didn't always arrive in big moments. Sometimes it came quietly, carried by people who learned better. At the final school event of the year, students gathered for awards and speeches. The gym was filled with nervous energy. Names were called. Applause echoed. Then the principal paused. "There are students who change grades," she said. "And there are students who change people." The room went silent. She spoke about courage that didn't look loud, about kindness that didn't ask for praise, about choosing compassion when it would have been easier to walk away. When the girl's name was called, the applause was strong but respectful. When the boy's name followed, the applause was louder than he expected. He stood, eyes wide, hands shaking. He looked at her. She nodded. Later, as the gym emptied, he finally spoke. "I never thought I'd belong anywhere," she answered without hesitation. "You always did." As summer approached, their days grew lighter. They studied together, walked home together, shared quiet conversations about dreams and fears. People still stared sometimes. She didn't care. Strength, she had learned, wasn't about winning fights or being feared. It was about choosing love when the world expected cruelty. On the last day of school, as they stood at the doors one final time, the boy took a deep breath. "Thank you," he said. She shook her head. "For what?" "For seeing me," he said. She smiled. "For being worth seeing." They walked out into the sunlight together. Not as symbols, not as stories, just as two people who chose kindness and changed everything because of it.